1 minute ago, King Charles has just used a constitutional power not invoked in 47 years to completely block Keir Starmer's flagship reform bill. Parliament has erupted into absolute chaos. MPs are shouting, cabinet ministers are resigning, and Westminster insiders say this could trigger the biggest constitutional crisis since 1688. 3 senior Labour figures have already walked out. The pound is plummeting. And what Starmer said in response, the exact words leaked from number 10 just 11 minutes ago, could end his premiership before sunrise. And if you want to understand what's really happening to Britain right now, hit that subscribe button, because what comes next will shock you to your core. And the mainstream media won't dare tell you the whole truth. Here's what sparked this constitutional earthquake. Yesterday at 3:47 p.m, Starmer's Reform UK Electoral Systems Bill, designed to change how Britain votes forever, was heading for final approval in Parliament. His words were defiant, almost triumphant. This legislation represents the will of a modern, progressive Britain that refuses to be held hostage by outdated traditions. But King Charles wasn't having it. At precisely 4:12 p.m, the monarch invoked royal assent refusal. He didn't just delay the bill, he killed it dead. In a single stroke, Charles wielded constitutional authority that hadn't been used since 1978 and shattered Starmer's entire political agenda. The timing was deliberate, calculated, and absolutely devastating. Sources close to the palace revealed that Charles had been monitoring this legislation for weeks, consulting with Privy Council members and constitutional experts who warned him that the bill would fundamentally alter the balance of power in ways that could never be reversed. Within minutes of the King's decision, Parliament transformed into a war zone. Labour backbenchers were screaming at Conservative MPs across the chamber. Deputy Speaker Dame Eleanor Lying had to suspend proceedings 3 times because the shouting became so ferocious that nobody could hear anything over the chaos. Witnesses inside the chamber described it as something from a different century, raw, primal fury. Conservative MP Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg stood at the dispatch box and declared with barely contained satisfaction, "The Crown has reminded this arrogant government that Britain is a constitutional monarchy, not a Labour dictatorship. His Majesty has done what millions of Britons have been begging for. He stopped this madness." The Conservative benches erupted in applause so thunderous it rattled the ancient walls. Labour MPs looked shell-shocked, disoriented, betrayed. Some were visibly shaking. Minister for Constitutional Affairs Nick Thomas-Symonds was seen storming out of the chamber, face crimson, fists clenched, refusing to answer questions from anyone. But the real drama was happening in the corridors, just outside the main chamber, where Labour whips were desperately trying to prevent a complete meltdown of party discipline. And here's where it gets even more explosive. According to multiple sources who were in the room, Starmer received the news of the royal refusal while meeting with his senior strategy team in the cabinet room. His immediate reaction, described by one witness as volcanic, sent shockwaves through everyone present. Starmer allegedly swept a stack of briefing papers off the table, turned to his chief of staff, Sue Gray, and said words that will haunt him forever. "That senile old man in his castle just destroyed everything we've worked for." He thinks he can turn back the clock to when kings actually mattered. We'll show him exactly how irrelevant the monarchy has become. The room fell into stunned silence. Even his most loyal advisers couldn't believe what they had just heard. One cabinet minister later told allies, "I've served under 3 prime ministers, and I've never heard anyone speak about the monarch with such contempt." It was chilling. Within 2 hours, that quote had been leaked to 3 separate newspapers, clearly by someone in that room who wanted the British public to know exactly what kind of man now occupies number 10. Meanwhile, British veterans who served in the Falklands, Iraq and Afghanistan, men and women who gave everything for this country, are being told there's no money for proper healthcare or housing support. David Harrison, a 71-year-old former paratrooper from Stoke-on-Trent who lost his left leg in Northern Ireland, waited 9 months for a wheelchair ramp at his council flat. 9 months for basic dignity. "I fought for this country," he told reporters with tears streaming down his weathered face. "And now I can't even get into my own home without crawling." While veterans like David suffer, Labour has allocated £8.44 billion over 3 years for migrant integration programmes, luxury hotel accommodations and legal aid for asylum appeals. We're talking spa facilities, flat-screen televisions and daily meal allowances that exceed what pensioners receive after 50 years of paying taxes. Margaret Ellis, a 73-year-old widow from Durham whose husband died serving in the Royal Navy, receives £156.20 per week in state pension. That's £22.31 per day. Meanwhile, asylum seekers in government-contracted hotels receive food, accommodation and services valued at approximately £40 per day, nearly double what Margaret gets after her husband gave his life for Britain. She heats only one room in her house during winter because she can't afford the energy bills. She eats one proper meal a day. And when she wrote to her Labour MP asking for help, she received a form letter about competing budget priorities. And the contrast is so grotesque, so morally bankrupt, that even traditional Labour voters in working-class strongholds are openly revolting against Starmer's priorities. In pubs across the Midlands and the North, conversations that once defended Labour now speak of betrayal, of forgotten promises and a party that abandoned the very people it was created to serve. But then something happened that nobody, not the pundits, not the pollsters, not even Buckingham Palace insiders, saw coming. King Charles broke 70 years of royal protocol and addressed the nation directly. At 7:30 p.m. last night, broadcasters interrupted regular programming for an unprecedented live statement from Windsor Castle. Standing beneath portraits of Queen Elizabeth II and King George VI, Charles looked directly into the camera and spoke with a gravity that sent chills through millions of viewers. "I have today exercised a constitutional authority that I hoped never to use," the King declared. His voice steady but weighted with unmistakable resolve. But when legislation threatens the very foundations upon which our democracy rests, when it seeks to fundamentally alter the compact between Crown, Parliament and people without proper mandate, then silence becomes complicity. "I will not be complicit in the dismantling of British constitutional tradition." Palace insiders revealed that Charles spent 3 days consulting constitutional scholars, former prime ministers and senior judges before making his decision. One source described the king as agonised but absolutely certain that Starmer's bill represented an existential threat to the balance of power that has kept Britain stable for centuries. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major reportedly spent 90 minutes on the phone with Charles, walking him through historical precedents and potential consequences. Lord Jonathan Sumption, one of Britain's most respected constitutional authorities, provided a detailed legal memorandum that Palace sources described as devastating in its analysis of the bill's constitutional implications. The optics are absolutely devastating for Starmer. The sovereign himself, the one figure in Britain who transcends politics, has essentially declared Labour's flagship legislation dangerous and illegitimate. The domino effect was swift and brutal. Within 90 minutes of the King's speech, the pound sterling dropped 3.2% against the dollar, the sharpest single-day decline since Brexit. Currency traders in London, New York and Tokyo started dumping British assets, fearing prolonged political instability. Financial Times analysts estimated £1.8 billion was wiped from the FTSE 100 in a single trading session. By midnight, Labour's internal polling showed catastrophic results. Approval ratings down from 39% to 21% in just 8 hours. In key constituencies across the Midlands and the North, places Labour desperately needs to hold, support collapsed by 19 percentage points. And Defend the King became the #1 trending topic globally, with over 4.7 million posts in 12 hours. Protests erupted spontaneously across British cities. In Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham and Newcastle, crowds gathered outside Labour constituency offices demanding Starmer's immediate resignation. Some carried Union Jacks, others held signs reading "The Crown protects Britain" and "Starmer, modern traitor." In Leeds, over 3,000 people marched through the city centre chanting "God Save the King" while waving flags and holding photos of Queen Elizabeth. In Glasgow, traditionally a Labour stronghold, protesters burned an effigy labelled "Constitutional Traitor Starmer" outside the Scottish Parliament. Veteran Labour MP Stephen Kinnock admitted to the BBC, "I've been in politics for 20 years and I've never seen my own constituents turn on the party like this. They feel betrayed." But the international response made it even worse for Starmer and Britain's global reputation. World leaders are watching this constitutional crisis with a mixture of fascination and horror. In Ottawa, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney issued a carefully worded statement praising the vital role constitutional monarchy plays in preserving democratic stability and continuity. Everyone understood the subtext. He was supporting Charles and rebuking Starmer. In Canberra, Australian opposition leader Peter Dutton was far less diplomatic, calling Starmer's actions a disgraceful attack on the Crown and an embarrassment to Commonwealth nations everywhere. New Zealand's Parliament held an emergency debate where MPs from across the political spectrum condemned what they called Labour's reckless constitutional vandalism. Even in the United States, where monarchy holds no constitutional role, political commentators expressed shock. CNN's Christiane Amanpour dedicated her entire show to the crisis, interviewing constitutional scholars who unanimously agreed that Starmer had committed political suicide. Fox News ran a banner headline reading, "British PM declares war on King, nation in chaos." The Wall Street Journal published a scathing editorial titled "The Collapse of British Political Wisdom." Britain, once viewed as the gold standard of political stability and constitutional continuity, has become an international punchline in less than 24 hours. Foreign investors are quietly pulling back from UK commitments. Credit rating agencies have placed Britain on watch for potential downgrade. The damage to national credibility is incalculable and may take years to repair. Inside number 10 Downing Street, the atmosphere is being described as pure panic, bordering on hysteria. Ministers are shouting at each other in emergency meetings that have now stretched past 2 a.m. Foreign Secretary David Lammy allegedly threw a water bottle against a wall after learning about the polling collapse, shouting that Starmer had torched the entire party for ideological vanity. Chancellor Rachel Reeves was overheard telling allies, "If he doesn't resign by Monday, we remove him ourselves." "I'm not going down with this ship." WhatsApp groups with names like Stabilise Labour and Post-Starmer Strategy are buzzing with frantic messages every few seconds. MPs are openly discussing leadership challenges, deputy leadership coups and emergency party conferences. The question isn't if Starmer survives this, it's whether Labour itself survives. One cabinet minister, speaking on condition of anonymity, admitted, "Keir looks destroyed. He barely speaks, just stares at the polling data like he's watching his own funeral." Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has quietly begun reaching out to moderate MPs, promising calm leadership and constitutional respect. Classic preparation for a leadership bid.